Hi everyone, can you believe that our baby is already in early childhood? Time really does go by so quickly in this class. And so this week we're going to focus on physical development during this stage. We're going to look at both nutrition and how nutrition affects growth, physical growth, and brain growth as well. We're going to look at motor development, both fine and gross motor, some sleep needs and recommendations, and also some sleep disorders as well. We're going to look at toileting and different elements of health and safety. So let's start with the physical development. So as we can see, children are still making some consistent growth in both height and weight during this stage. A typical 3-year-old still kind of has some of those baby proportions where the head is still larger than the body. It's still disproportionate head to body ratio. But when you look to a 6-year-old, you see that those proportions start to even out and that child starts to look more adult-like in their proportions. Children during this early childhood stage are typically growing about 3 inches per year and gaining about 4 to 5 pounds per year as well, so that the typical 6-year-old is about 46 pounds and 46 inches tall. Now, that is what's considered typical. There's always going to be children who fall outside of that range. These are children who are taller for their age or shorter for their age or way more or way less. Heredity has a lot to do with that, but so does nutrition. So the typical 2 to 3-year-old needs about 1,000 to 1,400 calories. But once the child gets older, between 4 and 8 years old, children need more calories, 1,200 to 2,000 calories. Now, more doesn't mean that the child now needs a Big Mac instead of a Happy Meal. But I do want to tell you that a Happy Meal every once in a while is not going to be harmful for your child. So please, no parent shaming here. We all need a good McDonald's run once in a while, so no shame. But it's important for a growing brain to consider what your child or a child is being given when it comes to nutrition. What is the nutritional value? Not just the caloric intake, but the nutrition that comes with those calories. Especially because this is the stage where children often go through a picky eating phase. So something they might have loved 2 weeks ago, now all of a sudden it's the worst thing in the world and get it off their plate and a tantrum ensues. So really paying attention to how we're introducing food, how many times we're introducing food. For this stage of childhood, children need about 15 different introductions before they might try a food. So if you serve broccoli one night and the child says, no, I don't want it, it's disgusting, don't give up. Don't say, I'm never putting broccoli on a plate again. That just means you have to introduce it a little bit more times. And so maybe every night for dinner for 2 weeks, broccoli is a choice. Eventually, what that child is going to do is try it. And they might like it in 2 weeks, even though they hated it 2 days ago. So, really reintroducing broccoli, still making it an option. The same goes with any other foods that are being pushed to the side during this sometimes picky eating stage. Sometimes it's not pickiness. Sometimes it's just that the child is learning how to regulate hunger. And so they might not be hungry at the same times that we are as adults. So as long as we're providing adequate and sound nutrition, um, we're not going to do any harm to the children that we're supporting and caring for. If we're limiting sugary drinks and sugary snacks, it's more likely that children are going to choose the healthier times to eat and the healthier food options during meal times. But if children have, complete access to all the cookies they want all day, or, all of maybe I know some children who just want fishy crackers all day long. By the time they sit down to eat dinner, they're full. They're no longer hungry because they have a belly full of fishy crackers. So looking at how many snacks you're giving and what type of snacks you're giving. And then also drinks. So if a child has juice all day or milk all day, it's highly possible for children to get full off of that as well. If a child does not want to eat during a meal, they will not starve. Children are really good at, if they're hungry, they will eat. But if they don't like something, they also have a lot more time to have a power struggle than we do. So you might say, well, then no dinner for you. And to that child, they're like, okay, fine. But when they come back out to say that they're hungry, that same plate of food is going to be offered instead of an alternative. So here are some recommendations that both your textbook and other professionals have put together to support families and professionals in how to help children during this early childhood stage in nutrition. So again, don't force children to eat. They're learning how to regulate. And so when we're forcing children to eat, we're developing unhealthy relationships with food. I don't know about you all, but I grew up in a family where we had to finish every single thing on our plates because there were starving children in other countries. Even if we were full, we would be forced to eat everything and not waste. And so to this day, as an adult, I struggle with recognizing when my body is full and stopping and eating there because I was forced to eat as a child past the point of being full. And so that's what we're doing when we're forcing children to eat is their body might be telling them that they're full, but they're getting mixed messages from the adults in their life saying, no, keep eating, you have to finish. And so we're teaching their stomachs to grow and need more food to be full and not acknowledge that feeling that our body naturally gives us. Um, Appetite varies too. So we talked a little bit about this earlier. Children sometimes go through stages where they love one thing and they want to eat all the time, and sometimes they only want to eat once a day. And so it really is okay to allow children to figure out when they're hungry and when they're not. Even doctors will tell you they won't starve. They're not going to starve themselves. Keep it pleasant. Mealtime should be a time of positivity. It should be an exciting time for children to be with either their family or friends or whoever is taking care of them at that time. Um, Allow children to participate in the preparation of food, whether that's stirring something or setting the table or even chopping something at this age. Children want to be part of this. And studies show that when children participate in the preparation, they're more likely to eat the result. So when you include children in preparing food, you're allowing an opportunity for them to successfully eat the food as well. Um, Adults, we're not short order chefs. So if the child does not want something that has been prepared, that doesn't mean that we are going to prepare something else. I know my sister and I have this conversation often because I have a niece that's extremely picky. She is 7 years old now, so a little bit out of the early childhood stage, but she went through this stage where she would not eat whatever was for dinner. She only wanted mac and cheese or chicken nuggets or a specific type of soup. And so my sister and my brother-in-law would cook these beautiful meals, and then they would cook something separate for my little Lexi girl. And so she would get her own separate meal every night. And she learned that I could throw a fit and I could just say I don't want to eat, and I can throw myself under the table and I can do all of these behaviors and get something else prepared for me. And so I try to support my sister in giving her different options. So having multiple options on the plate for her. So a vegetable and a meat and just different types of food that she's making for the entire family. And if she doesn't want that at that time, put it away, let her sit at the table, enjoy the conversation, or have her take a break, and then come back to the table when she's hungry to try what was made for her. But there's no alternative meals being made during dinner time. It's not a restaurant unless you're playing restaurant that night. I encourage you not to cook different meals for each person in the family. Um, Limit the choices. So even though I said put different choices, you don't want 10 different choices for mealtime. So what do we want for dinner? Do you want a salad or a sandwich or chicken or meatloaf? Having too many options can also be very overwhelming for children. The same with snack time. If you just open the refrigerator and say, what do you want? That could be extremely overwhelming for children. But if you give children, let's say, two choices of things that you're going to be happy with either choice as the adult. Like, do you want apple slices or grapes for snack today? You're happy with both. So anything that the child chooses is going to be an appropriate choice. If you give your child an option that you're not happy with and that child chooses that option, well, then you've just set yourself up for failure. So, well, do you want an apple or do you want candy for a snack? Well, if the child chooses candy, you've given that as an option, and so now that child has the right to make that decision. So think about the choices that you're offering to children as well. Serve balanced meals, so allow them to be exposed to different types of foods, to different food groups, and that way the more exposure that they're having, the more likely they are to try and tolerate new foods. In our family, we've done something called a no thank you bite. So since my daughter was very little, everything that we offered to her, she would do a no thank you bite. And that didn't have to be a bite. Could smell it. She could put it to her lips. She can lick it. Something to get her to at least try it. And she did not have to eat it. So if she bit into it and she said, or licked it and said no thank you, she wouldn't have to eat it at that time. And we just would keep introducing it to her until she finally would say, hey, you know what? I kind of like this. Or no, I don't like this. And to this day, she has a really great appetite and really great palate for different types of foods, different textures. She's very adventurous in her eating, which is fun for me because I am also a foodie. So we really enjoy trying new things now. Don't bribe children. So using food as bribery or using anything as bribery during mealtime, again, creates a really unhealthy relationship between children and food. So if we say, if you eat all your dinner, you get dessert, what that does is makes eating a task and makes eating an unhealthy game. And so then children aren't eating because they're hungry or because they need to, they're eating because they want something in return. And eating is something that we have to do all the time. And so if we create this experience that children require and expect a reward every time they're doing something basic like eating, that's not going to lead to a very successful eating habit. Okay. Now let's talk about brain maturation. So the prefrontal cortex is really, really maturing at this stage. And what that means is that children are better able to coordinate their thoughts and their plans. They're better able to take direction and instruction. And I love that your book talks about the game of soccer. So as a former soccer player, I still loved to go to the little children's games. And if you've ever been to a game of soccer for children under 6 years old, it's really just like herding cats. It's a bunch of children all trying to get the ball and just running up and down the field. Some children are picking flowers. And so they're not quite able to coordinate those movements or take instruction or understand even what the purpose of the game is. But for children who are about to be 6 years old, what they're starting to do is take instruction, right? Go get the ball, dribble, shoot it in the net. So they're starting to see, okay, there's a point to this game. I have a goal. This is how I get there. So prefrontal cortex really shows maturation and ability as well. Visual pathways are also changing. And so children are progressing in some of their artistic capabilities. So you might see a child, at 2 years old or 2 and 3 years old doing scribbles. And then as they get older, all of a sudden their scribbles start to have different features and different shapes within them. And then it progresses to actual forms. So actual animals, actual people with 6+ different features like eyes and ears. All of a sudden, your child brings you a piece of art and the person has arms. And so you start to see this progression of art because they're starting to better understand how to match what they're observing in the world and be able to put those observations down on paper. The hemispheres are also developing, specifically the left hemisphere, because children are really having such an incredible language explosion during this time. Their language capabilities are maturing. They're able to put really complex thoughts into words. They're able to have conversations, ask questions. This is the why stage, but why? But why? But why? Because they're taking in so much information. If you have a child who asks question after question after question, that's a good thing. I encourage that because they're so curious about the world. Questions are the way they get those answers. There's also an increase in growth in the right hemisphere as well. So, spatial skills, shape and pattern recognition, children are better able. This has a lot to do with those visual pathways and artistic capabilities also. And while both of the hemispheres are growing and maturing, the corpus callosum, which is that centerpiece that allows communication between hemispheres, is also maturing. And what that means is that the hemispheres can communicate with each other more efficiently. So it's a growth and a maturation and communication abilities as well between hemispheres. All right, we're going to play a little game together, and you're going to do this during your lecture quiz, our lecture study session. And so I'm going to ask the question and pause for you to answer, and then we can talk about both gross motor and fine motor and whether you're able to identify those different skills correctly. So first, let's talk about gross motor and fine motor and define it. So when we think gross motor, we're thinking large motor skills. So large movement, using big muscles, big movements, running, jumping, swinging, hopping. These are all gross motor skills. And a lot of skills build onto each other sequentially. And so you might see a child who is able to first balance on one foot. And then after they balance on one foot, they're able to hop 3 times. And then they're able to balance on one foot for more than 10 seconds. And so their skills are progressing over time. And a great way to work on things like, let's say, hopping is marching, because what are you doing every time you're marching? If you're marching slow enough, that child is balancing for a second. And so that's a great starting point for working on balancing and then working on hopping. So when we talk about fine motor is small muscle skills and eye-hand coordination. And so these skills are like writing and cutting, using scissors to cut, threading, catching a ball. Those are all things that are considered fine motor skills. So fine motor is small motor, small movement. Gross motor is big movement, big muscles. Okay, so let's try this. So a child pouring water into a cup. Is this gross motor or fine motor? Okay, let's go to the next one. A child cutting with scissors. Is this a gross motor or fine motor? All right, let's go to the next one. A child or children engaging in this outdoor obstacle course. Is this gross motor or is this fine motor? Right, a couple more. This child finger painting. I love that he's not only finger painting on the paper, but also all over his face. So is this gross motor or is this fine motor? Okay, two more. This child really enjoying herself on the swing. Is she working on her gross motor skills or her fine motor skills? Great. And the last one, this child picking up blocks with tongs. I really love telling families about this activity because most people have a pair of tongs in their kitchen. And you don't have to use the tongs for blocks. You can use the tongs to pick up different toys around the house. If you have beans or dried pasta or cereal. So you can use tongs to work on fine motor with so many different things. But is this child working on their gross motor or fine motor with this activity? Great. So we're going to move on. I hope that was good practice to see the difference between gross and fine motor. Gross motor is big muscles, big movements, fine motor, small muscles, small movements. So now let's talk about sleep needs and different conditions of sleep. Sleep really supports brain growth. That's when our brain is solidifying those connections and those synapses is during sleep. And so just as it's important for us to get sleep, think about when you don't sleep enough, you have physical symptoms of that lack of sleep the next day. It's hard to concentrate, it's hard to focus. Children have that same impact of not getting enough sleep. And so it's important for us to know how much sleep children need and to be able to support that sleep need. Young children need about 10 to 11 hours of sleep. Remember, infants and toddlers needed about 18 hours of sleep. Now we've moved to needing less sleep, so 10 to 11 hours and 2 hours of REM sleep instead of the 8 hours of REM sleep in infancy and toddlerhood. There are different conditions of sleep that commonly occur during this stage and sometimes last into adulthood. One of them is sleepwalking. And with sleepwalking, it can be very dangerous. So it's important to monitor children who are sleepwalking to make sure that they're able to be safe. Um, the video I have connected to this PowerPoint, and I'll post the PowerPoint so you can watch the video, is probably my favorite example of sleepwalking. I don't know if anybody has seen the movie Step Brothers, but both of them sleepwalk and they have like this whole storyline and they're putting cushions in the oven and they're talking in their sleep and sometimes can be a little bit violent. And so these are all common occurrences. They have no idea that they're doing what they're doing, no memory of it the next day, but they are very much, their motor behavior is very much awake. And that's what sleepwalking is cognitively you might be asleep, but your motor cortex within your brain is wide awake. And so that is commonly what causes things like sleepwalking and some of the nightmares and sleep tears. I also have a niece that sleepwalks, and I remember she was about 6 years old, and she was woke up in the middle of the night and went into the bathroom and turned on the shower and took a shower and got into the shower, got wet before her mom realized, wait a second, who's in the shower at 3 in the morning? So she went into the shower without waking her up, wrapped her in a towel, and put her back to bed. And in the morning, she woke up and she's looking around so confused. And she said, why am I wet? And why am I naked? She was so concerned about how she woke up that way. No memory at all that she had sleptwalked into the shower that night. It's important not to wake up children who are sleepwalking because they could wake up extremely disoriented and it could make them very anxious and a little aggressive because they're scared of how they're not where they were when they were sleeping. So sleepwalking does occur. So do sleep tears. Sleep tears and night tears and nightmare disorder are different. When it comes to sleep tears, those typically happen right when a child begins to fall asleep, so has just fallen asleep. Um, they will often have sleep tears during that early part of sleep. Night tears happen right before they wake up from sleep. And children, again, they with night tears, they often don't remember what they had. They don't know that they're awake. They just know that they're screaming and they're scared. And so supporting a child and getting back to sleep. Night terrors can also occur all the way into adulthood as well. Many individuals who have PTSD often experience night terrors also. Nightmare disorder is also something that can happen during early childhood. And this is when nightmares are occurring multiple times during the week, to the point where the child is now losing sleep because of the amount of nightmares that they are experiencing. And typically this requires some professional help now. So talking to a medical professional, a doctor, a psychologist, and supporting the child in how to either rid the nightmares or sleep through those nightmares. Okay. Now let's talk about toilet training. So this is the age, even though so many people want to work on toilet training when children are 1.5, 2 years old, the average age of toilet training is 29 months for girls and 31 months for boys. 98% of children are toilet trained by the time they are 3 years old, but close to their third birthday. And so I really want to emphasize the fact that children have this sphincter muscle. Well, we all have this sphincter muscle that helps us to control our bladder and control our bathroom needs. Children don't necessarily have that muscle developed until closer to 3 years old. And so, if we try to toilet train too early, they're going to have more accidents. They're not going to be as successful, and they're probably going to be a lot more discouraged from using the bathroom because they're having so many accidents. So, really looking at when is my child ready? How do I know that my child is ready to start toilet training? And here are some questions to ask. Is your child interested in the toilet? Do they follow you to the bathroom? Do they want to flush the toilet? Do they like to watch it go down when they flush the toilet? Do they want to sit on the toilet themselves? Those are all signs of interest. Does the child understand directions? So if you tell them, okay, let's go to the bathroom, do they know where that's at? Are they able to go to the bathroom? Can they pull up and pull down their pants with direction? Can they wash their hands with direction? So are they following these different steps? Do they tell you when they have to go? And for children who aren't yet verbal, this could be a sign. This could be touching their pamper and pointing to the bathroom. But are they doing something to tell you that they need to use the restroom? Um, are children staying dry for more than 2 hours? That's another question to ask yourself to see if a child's ready to start toilet training. And when they are wet, do they complain about wet or dirty diapers, or do they care less? So could they care less? If you see a child who is dirty for a long time and we won't tell you until you smell it, they're probably not ready to toilet train because it's not bothering them that they're dirty yet. But if a child starts to either take off their diaper when they're wet or dirty, or come to you to change their diaper, or bring you a diaper to change them, they're probably getting ready to start toilet training. Um, do they have the fine motor skills and the gross motor skills to pull down and pull up their pants? That's an important skill to be able to use the toilet independently. Same with being able to sit and rise from the toilet. They make little toilets for children and also the seat covers to put on adult sized toilets. Um, I actually recommend the latter, so the seats to cover the adult sized toilets, because then it's a smoother transition to them just using the adult sized toilet, like everyone else in the family. So I funny story, I'll never forget my when my daughter was toilet training, and she and my youngest brother are only 4 years apart. And so they've grown up more like siblings than like niece and uncle. And so when she started toilet training, she was very interested and wanted to follow my brother into the toilet, into the bathroom all the time. And so we'd sit her down on the toilet, and finally she asked, I want a pee pee like Uncle Chemo. And we're like, okay, well, you really can't. How does Uncle Chemo go potty? And so she put her hands on her head and did this little dance on the toilet. I'm like, oh, so that explains why there's pee all over the toilet seat, because he was doing a little dance while he was going potty. So she didn't necessarily mean standing up. She meant doing the little pee pee dance as she was peeing. So I love sharing that story because it was so innocent what she wanted to do, not necessarily stand up and pee, but do the little dance. So children, it really is a family preference when you have a boy, whether they want to stand up or sit down, or how you want to teach them to use the bathroom. All right. So that's toilet training. So if you answer no to any of these questions, the child might not be ready. Also, how much exposure are you giving them to the bathroom? Are they able to follow you into the bathroom? Are they able to flush the toilet for you? That can kind of promote some interest as well. All right. There are some elimination disorders. So it's important to note that these are involuntary and unintentional. And oftentimes there's nothing physically wrong with the child. So enuresis and encopresis are both different eliminating disorders. Enuresis is avoiding of urine into beds or clothes. So between 5 to 10% of 5-year-olds have enuresis, 3 to 5% of 10-year-olds, and 1% of those 15 and older actually experience enuresis. Very, very infrequently is it something that's actually wrong with the child's physical body. It's a disorder that is just involuntary. It's just a lack of control of being able to hold that in. And most of the time it does go away on its own, but sometimes you might want to reach out for support. And for sometimes you can be provided with the prescription for diapers or pull-ups for an extended period of time. Same with encopresis. It's the passage of feces into inappropriate places. So children who have bowel movements in their underwear, who have bowel movements maybe in the corners of rooms. This is less common than enuresis. So 1% of 5-year-olds experience this. It is typically more common in males and needs to be diagnosed by a medical professional. So there might be something else going on there. Okay. All right. Let's go to sexual development in early childhood. I know this is typically an uncomfortable conversation for a lot of families, but it's something that's important because there's a lot of misinformation out there. It's important to understand that during this age, curiosity is completely natural. Boys are starting to realize they have a penis, and girls are starting to realize they have a vagina, which when they rub against the couch, all of a sudden it gives them this good feeling. And boys, when they stick their hands down their pants, all of a sudden they get this feeling of pleasure. At this age, they don't know that it's socially inappropriate to touch themselves. And so their curiosity and their exploration is very innocent and extremely natural. How we respond as the adults is going to either support that curiosity and allow the child to go through this stage appropriately. Or if we respond negatively and harshly and with shame, it actually creates a really unhealthy relationship with that child in the future, with sexual experiences in the future, because there's now a shame with that feeling. So when children are self-stimulating or engaging in self-stimulation, how do you support that? How do you respond appropriately is often the question that I get. Teaching children that that's something that you do in private. So when we have company, you don't sit on the couch and put your fingers in your vagina. That is something you go to your room and do, and teach them hygiene. You wash your hands afterwards, you wash your hands before. And so, teaching children that their curiosity is okay, but it's not something that you do in public. It's not something that is okay to really talk about in public. It's a private thing. And so when you support children in that way, typically children grow out of that curiosity. Um, Children are also curious about what the other person's working with also. I love the example in your textbook when the little girl asked her mom, so only doctors can see boys penises? And the mom says, yeah, that's right. And the little girl says, I want to be a doctor when I grow up. It's curiosity. It's, wow, I don't have that. I wonder what yours looks like, what yours can do. And so also showing each other at what they have is very natural for young children. And so how do you support that? You supervise so that they're not doing that in a private setting. You teach children that your private parts are your private parts. And yes, boys have a penis and girls have a vagina, but that's something that is your own body and your own space. And this is an appropriate time to talk about consent and talk about what's socially appropriate and what's not socially appropriate. But to shame children is what creates this really unhealthy relationship with their bodies and with different pleasure sensations as they get older and more mature enough to be able to experience those. So I know this, like I said before, it's super uncomfortable for parents and for families to talk about this or to see their child do this for the first time. I've actually worked with families that have sewn the top of the pajamas to the bottom of their child's pajamas so that their child does not put their hands in their pants. I've seen children be yelled at. I've seen children be completely shamed in public when they've done this. I've also seen families worry that their child's been molested because all of a sudden now their child is touching themselves. And while on very rare occasions that can happen, most of the time, this is just a natural process that children go through because they're starting to realize what's on their bodies and what their bodies are made out of and what feelings can happen within their bodies. So, again, supernatural, absolutely appropriate, and how we respond is going to determine whether they have a healthy relationship with their sexual development or an unhealthy relationship with that sexual development. Okay. All right. Now let's look at health. So childhood obesity is still on the rise. So between 2015 and 2016, almost 14% of 2 to 5 year olds were considered obese. And what we know is there's a disproportionate effect on children from low income families. I want you to think about, where are the fast food restaurants? On every corner, but in what neighborhoods? What restaurants are available where? Some of the causes of childhood obesity are eating high calories, first of all, but also with low nutrients, not getting enough physical exercise, so the sedentary lifestyle, medication use. So children who suffer from asthma often have to take steroids, so sometimes that could lead to swelling and obesity as well. Different sleep routines, so children who are not getting enough sleep also tend to take on more weight. And so there are consequences, not only physically, but also socially and psychologically. So children are getting prepared to go to school. And we know that children, when they are obese, they tend to have a more difficult time with social relationships and with teasing. And so we really want to make sure that we're setting children up for success in their health and in their social interactions as well. All right. Another thing to think about when we think about nutrition and health is food allergies. Children this age are going into childcare a lot of the times. And so making sure that we're communicating, if we're a parent with the childcare provider, if we're a childcare provider, that we're communicating with the families and everyone that's going to be interacting with this child about this child's allergies. It's important to keep allergies, medical information confidential, but just knowing that there is a child in this program who's allergic, let's say to peanuts, because that's a really big concern. Having it be a nut-free zone, so there should be no peanuts on the premises at any time. Checking children's lunches, sending something out to families saying, please don't pack your children peanut butter and jelly. Making sure that families know that even if you have residue of peanuts on your hands because you haven't washed your hands, that can also set off an anaphylactic reaction. So really, the more information you have and you provide to others, the safer your environment is going to be. There are 8 main allergens. Typically in early childhood, they're milk, eggs, fish, crustacean shellfish, wheat, soy, peanuts, and tree nuts. 4% of children and adolescents have some kind of food allergies. So there's most likely going to be someone, if you're a teacher in your classroom, if you are a family, maybe one person in your extended family has some kind of food allergies. So the CDC recommends that there's awareness, first of all, who has the allergy. There's education, how to respond to an allergic reaction and how to keep the environment safe. Ensuring daily management of the environment, and then preparation. Do I have an EpiPen? Do I know how to administer this EpiPen? Do I have a plan of action with, you're going to call 911, I'm going to support the child, who's going to let the other families know. So making sure there's a plan and preparation in case a child does have an allergic reaction. When it comes to oral health, sometimes families think that they don't need to brush children's teeth until the teeth are there. But early dental care and oral care is so important, because by the time children are this age, we're often seeing that children have cavities. And in fact, cavities are one of the most common chronic conditions of childhood in the United States. So what are we not doing right? Part of it is the education piece. If cavities go untreated, they can be extremely painful. And then if there's an infection, they can lead to problems, not only eating, but problems speaking, problems playing, and problems learning. So it can actually be an infection that even goes up into the brain. Fortunately, tooth decay is preventable. So fluoride treatments have decreased cavities, and dental sealants are now huge in the prevention of cavities for young children. So there's an 81% prevention rate in when children get dental sealants. Okay. All right. Other protections from illness. Even though we talked about immunizations in infancy and childhood, there are still boosters that need to take place in early childhood in order to really support the child in their immunity. Schools, there's now a law that schools will not allow children within their school system if they do not have up-to-date immunizations. There are medical exceptions, but even those are being scrutinized right now. Actually, right now during a pandemic, immunizations are considered when children aren't in the program. I know some private schools who are not mandating immunizations because children aren't around other children. So that's a very rare case, but once everyone goes back to campus, that's going to change. Teaching children hand washing. Children are never too young to learn how to appropriately wash your hands. Now more than ever, there's actually a process to washing your hands. You're going to wet your hands with warm water. This is what your book says. I actually recommend using that paper towel, getting the paper towel first, and then wetting hands, lathering with soap, singing the happy birthday song or singing your ABCs twice, and scrubbing your wrist, your hands, the back of your hands, the front of your hands, in between your fingers, your fingernails, and then rinsing well and drying your hands with the paper towel, turning the water off with that paper towel, and then throwing, if you're going to leave the area, opening the door with that paper towel and then throwing it away. So there's a whole process. Not everybody washes their hands appropriately. So important to teach children how to do this. Okay. Safety, the last thing we're going to discuss. During this early childhood age, injury is the #1 cause of death among young children. How do we prevent this? How do we prevent injury? Car crashes are one of the ways that children are getting injured. But if children are safely restrained in an appropriate car seat or booster seat and in the back seat of the vehicle, this can help prevent injury in a car accident. Suffocation. Don't leave children in the car at any time. There's been so many suffocation events due to leaving children in hot cars that now people are actually making recommendations to leave your cell phone in the car seat because it's more likely you're going to remember your cell phone than it is for you to remember your child. There's something so wrong about that to me, but if that works and that supports people in remembering to take their children out of the car, and it keeps children from dying, then by all means, leave that cell phone in the car seat. There's also apps that you can set to remind yourself to not lock your child in the car. There's also car seats that are being invented that have a warning sign when your child is in them. There's all kinds of this new technology in response to so many children dying from suffocation from being left in the cars. So many times it's accidentally. With electronic cars, I had an old neighbor who the technology in her car went haywire, and when she got out of the car, before she could open the back seat or the back door to the back seat, the car automatically locked, and we were all out there with her and she couldn't get the remote to work. She was in a panic. It was a hot day. Thank goodness the firefighters came, got him out. He had a cup of water, a sippy cup of water, so he was able to stay hydrated. It was so scary, and it happened just in a matter of seconds, and it was because the technology in the car went completely haywire. So such a scary event. Totally on accident, but really making sure that no one intentionally leaves children in the car is like a great way to avoid that. With drowning, having everybody be CPR trained, having fenced off pools, and not just fences where a child could reach up, climb up, and undo the latch, but having a lock that needs a key or something where the child can't climb through or climb over. Making sure that children are always wearing their life jackets and supervised around any body of water. For poisoning, lock up medications and toxins, know the poison control number. With fires, making sure your home is up to date with smoke alarms, that the family has an escape plan. Children are able to understand what to do in case of these emergencies. And then supervise the stove and the microwave. I'll never forget the day that my daughter wanted to warm up the leftovers, and she was about 4 years old, and we've always given her opportunities to cook independently. Well, she had pushed a stool up to the microwave because our microwave is up high, and she had had the foil, the leftovers in foil from a restaurant that she was about to put in the microwave. Thank goodness I only turned my back for just 1 minute. And then by the time I turned back around, I was able to stop her from putting the foil in the microwave, which, as we all know, can cause an explosion. So, really making sure that we're supervising that independent use of kitchen equipment. And then for falls, having safe playground landing surfaces, um, different safety devices, protective gear, and supervision. A big thing here is helmets. So if you're teaching children how to ride a bike or a scooter, making sure that they have a helmet on, that's a huge prevention in fall injuries. Okay, so that is our chapter for this week for physical development and early childhood. I hope you enjoyed the information and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.